one of the principles I don't think that we've really covered much in great depth is the principle of correspondence. And the Hermetic principle of correspondence is basically where we get the as above, so below axiom. And, you know, in the idea of the principle of correspondence is that if you understand the principle, you're able to understand large amounts of esoteric data just by being able to observe the microcosm. Because wherever there's any truth in the microcosm, the macrocosm also holds the same truth. And that is the esoteric understanding of the line in the Bible that God created man in his own image. All that means is as above, so below. So if you are a Kabbalist, it makes a lot of sense how the tree of life is very helpful in magical operations, because you're able to understand that the spheres on the tree of life can be seen as a type of filing cabinet, and if one deity sits in that sphere, then the incenses and the planets and the metals that sit on that sphere would then correspond to that deity. So everything within that sphere would correspond to everything else within that sphere. That doesn't necessarily mean that that each deity is synonymous with each other deity within that sphere. It doesn't mean that they're the same exact deity. It means that they're similar, that they correspond in certain ways. They carry forth a similar vibration, and some deities will fit in a particular place on the tree of life in certain aspects, and other areas on the tree of life in other aspects. And this is where things get a little bit esoteric. So just because you understand, as above, so below, doesn't mean that just because we are made in the image of God, if we're going to use that saying, doesn't mean that we are God. It means that we are a reflection of the macrocosm. The macrocosm. The microcosm is a reflection of the macrocosm, and that if you understand the microcosm, it's easier for you to understand the macrocosm. I think it was stated in the one of the Hermetic texts that if you understand the principles of geometry, then you can understand the principles of the universe. But it doesn't mean that the universe can be necessarily simplified into the simple principles of geometry, but one lends you the understanding of the other. So when we're looking at how this is practical, is when we always talk about that your experiences in your life are a reflection of the invisible principle that is the creative force behind those experiences. So since the creative principle is invisible, but it is the active or creative principle, then the passive principle of the effects are visible, and you can understand the causation of the experiences and circumstances of your life by looking into the circumstances themselves. So, very much like we always say, if you want to know how you feel about money, look in your checkbook. But you can go a lot more. That's a very simplified way of saying things. But if you want to know about how the collective consciousness of a nation, for instance, thinks about money, look at the economic conditions within that culture. And so if we look at here in 2010, the economic conditions in a lot of the world, but I live in America, so we'll look at America. which is where a lot of the problems started, was in our own country. With a lot of the world economic problems started in our own country. We're not responsible for 100% of them, but we own quite a bit of the majority, I would say, of the responsibility of what's going on. It came about because of a type of greed that puts money over people, and puts money as more important than people. And when money became more important than people in our consciousness, then money became more important than people in reality, and therefore money is what is more important to a lot of our society right now than each other. So we look more as a society, I'm not talking about individually, but as a society, we are looking more about what's more important right now. What's driving the election is economics more than how can we help one another, right? And you can look at the group mind of just a family, for instance. If a family has instances of like, say, teenagers within their family, when they become teenagers, that they tend to break down, they tend to drop out of school, they tend to rebel in a way that's beyond what the norm is, then there's something in the family dynamic that is at play. If you are looking at, like, if you're a part of a spiritual community, say a coven or something like that, if you notice that you tend to have people leaving your group in anger, a certain amount of that is just normal. But if it tends to happen where you cannot, maybe say, grow beyond 5 people without there being a lot of friction, and then somebody leaves in anger, or a lot of and the group tends to break down and it has to be rebuilt over and over again, there's something within the group mind of that community that needs to be addressed. Things don't just happen because by chance. Things happen for a reason, and the consciousness within an individual or within a group of people is the causative factor. Now, when I say we were talking about this on the forum. When I say consciousness, I'm not talking about your minute to minute, minute by minute attitudes or thoughts. I'm talking about your overall habitual mental condition. And a lot of the habitual overall mental condition of an individual, or a society, or a group, but we'll talk about an individual. A lot of times, we are actually, most of the time, when there's a problem within the general consciousness of an individual, it is very skillfully put under wraps by that individual so that they don't have to look at it and don't have to take responsibility for it. That's a very common weakness in the human condition, is that when there is a problem within our consciousness that's creating results that are undesirable for us, we have a very difficult time taking responsibility for it. One of the reasons why is because when we have a tendency to suppress that which is not something that is pleasant to us, especially something that is our own responsibility, something that is our own doing, something that is our own creation. And we have a tendency, there's a very strong tendency in human beings to do what is often called projecting, so that there's always an external reason why things are happening to us, and we rarely want to look at the fact that the things that are happening to us, especially the things that are happening to us over and over and over again, the common denominator in all these situations is us. You know, I know. For myself, there's been many times when, like, say, I had a series of difficulties within my own spiritual community about I would say, I don't know, 15 years ago, that I was constantly pissing people off. And I kind of assumed that I was a nice person, and I pretty much am a very nice person. But see, I had this real temper, kind of this real anger within me about me, that it would flare up, and I would be feel so justified in the way, in the reasoning for my being upset with people, that I never saw it objectively as being something that was abusive, that was hard to handle, that was hard to be around. And over time, people would be like, "Yeah, I really love you and everything, but I cannot be around that kind of abusive behavior." It's just, and I would think, "Oh, well, you're so full of it. Yeah, I'm not abusive." Well, when I was able to do some more serious magical work on myself and get below the surface of a few things, I was able to let go of a lot of my need to war with myself and with others. And when those things dropped away, I was able to look back with more objectivity, because that condition wasn't there anymore, and say, "Oh, I understand. The reason why I was having so many of these interpersonal relationships with people I really loved and who really loved me was not necessarily because I was being victimized by the universe. It was because I was being very abrasive. I was being very abusive." And see, the thing is I was very good at, I'm a very likable person, so it wasn't like I was doing that all the time. And sometimes I would do it in a very funny, sarcastic way, so that if you didn't really know what was going on, you didn't get that I was being a jerk, So my point is that it was not necessarily even possible for me to get an objective look at how I was until after I was able to drop the thing itself. Well, how was I able to drop the thing itself? Well, because, again, this does go for as another aspect of the principle of correspondence, is that as above, so below. When I started going for the mental construct of peace, the mental constructs of going toward, as Eli would say, going for my perfection, which to me just means being in a state of peace and relaxation. I was really very very disciplined for a while at doing magic for that purpose, meaning daily meditations. I mean, I've always been a good meditator. I've always meditated every day. But this was, if you have an intention, if you're any good at doing this stuff, if you have an intention that is strong enough and that you have a desire to create that intention, it will come about. But everything costs something. You don't get something for nothing in this universe. And in order for me to get peace, I had to give up my abusive behavior. I couldn't have it both ways. I couldn't be peaceful and mean. I couldn't be peaceful. And again, I don't want to give the impression that I was just really mean, but I had an abrasive side to me. That's just, everybody's got something. My sun sign is Aries. I've got 3 planets in Aries, and I'm Aquarius, rising and moon. So I've got a lot of, I've got a lot of fire Ariesness in me. Plus I've got that fixed quality of Aquarius, which can be very detached and can be seen as very unfeeling of people's space. So that's part of my inborn weakness in life, is that I can be a lot to take, but I had to make a choice when as I was going down the line with this stuff, what's more important to me? Peace, or holding on to that more I don't know what the word is, that duller part of myself, that heavier part of myself, and allow the higher parts of those qualities that I have to come through. So my point in all of this is that if your life isn't working, there is a way, there is some validity to say, okay, well, let's just go through and say, let's look at the circumstances and see what is part of, what is that mental construct in my mind that's that corresponds to these things and work on that. Yes, there is that. But a lot of times it's impossible for us to get a truly objective look at ourselves, because Eli says we fail to recognize our strengths and we rationalize away our weaknesses. So what we do is we devise the Magi of old, he said, devise a system of initiation so that we can more quickly assimilate our strengths and let go of our weaknesses more quickly. Well, what initiation is there's definitely an initiatory side of things that is ritualistic, and that's not what I'm talking about here, because whether or not you're involved in an initiatory path or not, you can get the essence of the initiations by doing your own spiritual work that is focused on, I want to become more peaceful. I want to have a more peaceful life. Because if that is your intention, it will be imperative. You'll have to pay for it. And the cost of it, the currency of that is in giving up those things that are contrary to that peace. So if you're, if some of your qualities happen to be being very defensive, you will have to give those up. And you will start giving those things up before you even realize you gave them up. And then in retrospect, in hindsight, you'll look back and you'll say, oh, I see, I gave up that stuff. And I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing until I went for the peace. I went for the perfection. I went for, that's the line in the Bible, the New Testament, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all else should be added unto you. That's all that means. It's not necessarily seek ye first the kingdom of some patriarchal external deity. It means seek ye first the juice of your desire, the essence of your true desire, and all of the goodies are just added onto you. But don't go for the goodies. Let the goodies come to you. That's what we were talking about last month, and we talk about it a lot, is the idea of alchemy versus sorcery. It's not necessarily that one is inherently better or worse than the other. It's just that one is a lot more direct. So when you go for the peace, when you go for the happiness, when you go for the big qualities in life, and you work your magic on that stuff to becoming a more peaceful person, to becoming a happier person, then you can't get there without becoming more loving. You can't get there without becoming easier to be around. You can't get there without becoming more honest. So if you're a compulsive liar, the lying will drop of its own accord because you are going for spiritual truth. You can't have spiritual truth and be a compulsive liar. It won't. It just doesn't. It's impossible. But if you keep your eye on the prize, if you keep your eye single to the goal, which is spiritual truth, which is perfect peace, perfect love, perfect trust, whatever those qualities are that you're going for, if you go for the big stuff, by virtue of the law of correspondence, the trappings of your life will change to correspond to that new vibration. And you don't have to go through and analyze each and every little thought in your mind. What am I doing to create this result? What am I doing to create that result? That's not even going to be important, because no matter what you have in your life, you are going to see it from a new perspective, which is, again, I'm speaking a lot in biblical terms, which I'm sorry if that turns you off, but some of these are really great terms. I once saw through a glass darkly means I used to see things through the eyes of looking at the effect instead of seeking ye first the kingdom of heaven. And now, since my eye is focused directly and singularly on that which is truth, then everything else is colored within that. So even if your circumstances, say, didn't change and you didn't get anything that you thought you wanted, you'd still be happy because everything would be imbued with this new energy. But I guarantee you it's impossible, because this is how magic works. It's impossible for you not to attract to you the people and the circumstances that vibrate at that new level. It's impossible. I mean, it just has to happen. It's just the way things work. Not only that, but you will be noticed. I mean, everybody I know that goes through these kinds of initiations realize that the deeper they go into themselves, to the deeper commitment that they have to these core principles that they find that they desire, the more apt they are at wanting to and desiring new things. So yes, the Mercedes, the house, the blah, 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 those things are nice, but that's no longer the primary goal. All of a sudden, the goals are going to be things like service and giving and help. And where can I help? Where can I lend more help? Who needs me? And how can I be there for them? And again, it's not going out and searching for something that you can be a do good at. You can be a do-gooder. It's just that naturally you're drawn to those people in situations where you are able to lend help and light and love, and you may not even realize that happened. This is what happened with these podcasts. Is I never set out to become some sort of internet star or something like that. I just had these lectures that I thought, well, let's do something with them. Let's put them online. And then the next step was, well, somebody was like, well, could you do some new ones? Could you do other ones? So I did. And well, maybe you could do a beginning Wicca thing that you used to do in private. Could you put in person? Would you be able to do those online? So I thought, well, okay, I could do that. And I just as they say in AA, the next indicated step, I just did what I was led to do, what felt right to do. And I get these almost embarrassing sometimes emails from people saying how what I've said or what I've, the topic has changed their life. Well, I don't take responsibility for that. It's not me. It's not because I'm so wise and important. It's that the principle of correspondence is so powerful that when I plugged into my light, I was able to plug into the same energy where those people were plugging into their light, and we had an encounter, and we met in the middle somewhere, and we both had that same experience together. Not because I was causing it for them, but we had an encounter that created more light than there was to begin with. I hope that makes sense. So no matter. So you're going to touch people in ways that you didn't even realize. And in turn, those people are going to touch more people, and you won't even know what you did. Why? Because that's the way it works. That's how seeds are planted. The seeds it's not you doing any of this. This is just the goddess. This is how nature works. Seeds are scattered and thrive and grow, and new forests are planted, and it can happen very quickly. And that's how we're going to see a huge change for the better in the world, is not because we vote right or because of the politicians and the economists and the scientists and all of that, not because of what they're doing, but because of the energy behind what they're doing, because of what you and I are doing. Because when we know that we can get down to basics and say, okay, what are the core values? What are the core principles that I want in my life? They're usually things like love and peace and happiness and comfort and safety and prosperity. Not prosperity as greed, but prosperity meaning I can relax. Right? I can relax, and I have enough to give, and I have enough to help everybody around me. Those kinds of values, those are the things we want to go for, not the circumstances, not how can I make this thing happen and that thing happen and this thing happen, because then you're not even dealing with the law of correspondence. You're trying to as Marianne Williamson used to say, you're trying to rearrange the furniture on the deck of the Titanic. The ship is sinking, and you're trying to make it look pretty. That's not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to go into the world of cause. And so, yes, you can look at the circumstances in your life and say, "Whoa, things aren't working so well here. Things aren't so good." But instead of getting lost in the minutia of what possible thoughts could have caused this, what possible thoughts could have caused that can take you lifetime after lifetime after lifetime to just figure that stuff out. Instead, just say, what is the basic underlying principle that I want more of right now? Real big stuff. I want more peace. I want more happiness. I want to relax. I want to be able to relax and feel good. Those are the things that you want to go for, and that's what you take into your meditations. That's what you take into your magic, and you do that work daily. And the more you plug into that energy, the quicker these other situations just fall away, and they stop bothering you. And you're able to be of assistance to those around you who don't have this knowledge yet. And it's not because you go tell them to do this necessarily either. I mean, unless that's indicated. It's just your energy that you carry into a situation. People are like, oh, I can relax because you're here. I feel so good that you're here. I love you so much because you're here. Thank you for being here. And when they get it on a nonverbal level oftentimes, and they give it to the next person, etc., etc., etc. So that's another way of looking at the principle of correspondence, I hope, for you, that everything corresponds to everything else. But you want to go for, as Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven, not necessarily trying to change circumstances. The circumstances will change on their own very magically, with a capital M, if you keep your eye on what's important. I always look at Morgan Le Fay, and she didn't think about this person and that person and this and that. She had a goal in mind that was more important to her. From my understanding of what her goal was, she wanted to keep. There's different versions of that story. Or Merlin, he had a very specific goal in mind, and sometimes, yes, there was a spell involved with changing a circumstance here or a circumstance there, but it was always informed by a very much more deeper goal. It wasn't just swaying in the wind, this situation, that situation, this situation, let's fix this, let's fix that, let's fix this. No, it was always, there's something very, very important here that has to do with Camelot, that has to do with Arthur, that has to do with this round table, and this is what's important to us. So that is what our goal is here too, is to find that grail, if you will. Find what it is that is important, and keep our mind and keep our eye on focused on that. And by virtue of the principle of correspondence, all the situations in our life will start to correspond directly. And I'm always fascinated that people don't study the Kabbalah with a Q, because it makes things make so much more sense, especially if you're involved in a magical path, even if you're not part of the ceremonial magician set, even if you're a druid or a witch. I recommend it. I know it's hard. I know it's complicated. I know it can be a real challenge sometimes, and there are a lot of Judeo concepts in there that can rub people the wrong way. But remember, it's bigger than Judaism. It's actually older than Judaism, and it's a very amazing system to understand the principle of correspondence and see how everything corresponds with everything else. So I'm not telling you that you have to learn the Kabbalah in order to be a good magician or to get this stuff, but it sure is something to think about. It's definitely something to think about. It's always been a part of my craft, and I never push it on people because a lot of people aren't into it. But it can really, really jumpstart your understanding of a lot of these concepts. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say for today. It's always wonderful to speak with you. Until next time, love and many blessings.